I was no longer invisible. I was a thesis.
Dracula, 2025. Diary entries. Entry 6. The eyes of the student. Foreword. My name is Vlad Dracula. You know me as myth, as curse, as the shadow that refuses to fade. But in these pages, here in Grimwick's forbidden library, I am nothing more than an observer of life I can no longer lead. A spectator at a feast where I am both guest and meal. Today I write about eyes, the eyes of a student who saw too much. There are gazes that wound more deeply than sunlight, that penetrate more completely than any weapon forged by faith or fear. Some people look at you and see what you present. Others look at you and see what you are. And the rare few, the dangerous ones, look at you and see what you mean. If you keep reading, you will see her as I saw her, briefly, before the darkness closed around us both. Chapter 1. Vienna, the city of glass. I came to Vienna like an echo, soundless, reverberating, without origin. The city was quieter than Rome, more ordered than New York, but beneath its polished surface, it vibrated like a violin string stretched to the point of breaking. One wrong touch, and the whole thing would snap. I rented an apartment near the Ringstrasse, on the 4th floor of a building that still carried traces of the monarchy. Plaster moldings, parquet floors worn smooth by generations of footsteps, windows tall enough to let in light I could never enjoy. At night, the moon fell on the old stones as if testing whether they could still glow with the heat of empire. Vienna smelled of coffee, rain, and memory. In the cafes, people discussed philosophy, stocks, loneliness, the same subjects that have accompanied me for centuries, the eternal preoccupations of creatures who know they will die, but cannot accept it. I walked among them, invisible, but not forgotten. In this city, I had once been cursed. Today, they would interview me for a podcast. The irony is not lost on me. Nothing is lost on me. That's the curse of perfect memory. I had come here because of the bells, because of the voice in Rome that whispered 3 cities like a prophecy: Zurich, Rome, Vienna. The triangle of my vulnerability, the 3 points where my power was anchored and where, apparently, my enemies had decided to strike. Zurich had shown me that my earth could be touched. Rome had shown me that the church was moving. Vienna would show me something else, something I hadn't anticipated. Vienna would show me what it felt like to be understood. The apartment was adequate. High ceilings, thick walls, a kitchen I would never use. The building's other residents were the usual Viennese mixture: elderly widows, young professionals, a composer on the 3rd floor who played Mahler at inappropriate hours. None of them noticed me. None of them would remember me if asked. I am very good at being forgettable. It's a skill that takes centuries to perfect. On my first night, I walked the Ringstrasse, the grand boulevard that circles the inner city like a noose, or a crown, depending on your perspective. The opera house glowed. The Parliament building loomed. The Burg Theatre promised dramas that couldn't compare to the ones I'd witnessed in my centuries of existence. And everywhere, the weight of history. The Habsburgs had ruled here for 600 years. They understood something about power that democracies have forgotten. That true authority doesn't need to announce itself. It simply persists. It simply endures. It simply waits until everyone who remembers alternatives has died. I understood this too. It was, in many ways, my own strategy. But Vienna felt different this time. Wrong, in ways I couldn't immediately identify. The shadows fell at angles that didn't match the light sources. The reflections in shop windows showed things that weren't quite there. The city was watching me, with the same intensity I usually reserved for watching others. I didn't like it, but I stayed anyway, because the voice in the bells had commanded it, because the triangle needed to be completed, because somewhere in this city of psychoanalysis and pastry, someone was waiting for me. I just didn't know yet that she had been waiting her entire life.
In a city that never sleeps, where every light hides a story, and every night whispers, "What if?" One man turns the impossible into your next experience. Michi Sander, the name behind Vegas's most exclusive nights, private villas, secret shows, tables no one else can book. From the Strip to the sky, your access begins here. You don't wait in lines. You walk through velvet ropes. Because in Michi's world, the world waits for you. Discover the art of living at michisander.com. Vegas, done the way it was meant to be.
Chapter 2. The Library. I found her in the university library. Not by hunting, not by design. I was there for my own research, checking archives, following paper trails, trying to understand who had been asking questions about my various identities. The usual maintenance work of immortality. But I saw her, and I stopped. She was young, 25 at most, with dark hair that she pushed impatiently from her face whenever she turned a page. Her name, I would learn later, was Lena Varga, literature student, doctoral candidate, writer of a dissertation that would eventually change everything. Her eyes were light, too light for this city of shadows, gray, like morning fog, like rain on glass, like things that exist between states. I saw her first in the reflection of a window. She was reading about old myths, Eastern European folklore, legends of the undead, the taxonomy of monsters that academics had constructed to make the incomprehensible comprehensible. Irony, as I've noted, is an old game that fate never tires of playing. I watched her for several days, not from hunger. I had fed recently enough, and her blood held no particular appeal, but from curiosity, from the recognition of something I hadn't seen in a very long time. Her concentration had something religious about it. While other students stared at laptops, scrolled through forms, fragmented their attention across a dozen digital distractions, she read, actually read. With a fountain pen, she wrote notes in a leather journal, her handwriting small and precise. She believed in truth. I could see it in the way she approached her sources, not looking for confirmation of what she already thought, but genuinely searching for understanding, genuinely wanting to know. And belief in anything is always dangerous. Belief is the only force that has ever truly threatened me. Not weapons, not sunlight, not even the elaborate rituals of the church. Belief, because you cannot fight what someone truly believes. You can only wait for them to stop believing it. And she, Lena Varga, with her gray eyes and her fountain pen and her genuine hunger for truth, she believed in something that might be close enough to my existence to cause problems. I should have left then, should have walked out of the library and out of Vienna and let her complete her research without ever knowing how close she'd come to her subject matter. But I stayed, because curiosity is a hunger too, because I wanted to know what she would find, because after 5 centuries, I was perhaps a little tired of being the only one who understood what I was. I wanted to be seen. God help me. I wanted to be seen. That was my first mistake. Chapter 3. Conversations Between Lines. I spoke to her when a storm began. Rain hammered the tall windows of the library. Thunder shattered the silence between the shelves. The other students scattered, seeking shelter elsewhere, but she remained at her table, seemingly oblivious to the weather, lost in a text about Wallachian burial customs. I approached, offered to hold her book while she gathered her things. She looked up, smiled, but the smile was suspicious. The instinctive resistance of a creature that senses the world is more than it pretends to be. "You're interested in old legends?" I asked. "I study them," she replied. "But sometimes I think they study me back." A sentence too honest to be harmless. A sentence that suggested she understood something that most academics never grasp. That the subjects we choose are never random, that we are always, in some sense, writing about ourselves. I sat across from her. The storm intensified outside, but inside the library, in the pool of light cast by her reading lamp, everything was calm, suspended, outside of time. We talked about myths, about the way stories preserve themselves, passing from mouth to mouth, adapting to survive like organisms, about the idea that memory requires blood to stay alive, that the stories we tell are a form of sacrifice, an offering of attention that keeps the past from dying. "I am writing my dissertation on the transition from superstition to modernity," she said. "The way folklore became literature, legend became psychology, gods became archetypes. And who says," I asked, "that the transition ever actually happened?" She looked at me for a long time. Her eyes were gray, but deep, deep like water that swallows light, like wells that have no bottom, like the kind of darkness that doesn't threaten, but simply receives. I saw myself in those eyes. Not my reflection. I cast no reflection, but something else. Recognition, understanding. The particular horror of being truly perceived. "You're not a student," she said finally. "Are you?" "No." "What are you then?" I considered the question, considered the truth and all its variations, considered lying, which would be easier, and telling the truth, which would be more interesting. "I'm a researcher," I said, "like you. I study how things survive. She nodded slowly, as if this answer, insufficient as it was, nevertheless satisfied something in her. What things? All things. Ideas, institutions, people. The ones that last, the ones that don't. The patterns that determine which is which. And have you found the pattern? I smiled. The pattern is simple. The things that survive are the things willing to become something else. The things that insist on staying the same, they're the ones that die. She wrote this down in her leather journal with her fountain pen, my words captured in her handwriting. I should have been disturbed by this. Instead, I was flattered. That was my second mistake. Chapter 4. The Walk. Vienna is most beautiful in the rain. The lights reflect on the cobblestones like fires on wet skin. The grand buildings soften, their hard edges blurred by water and darkness. The city becomes what it has always secretly been, a stage set, a beautiful illusion. A place where the performance of civilization continues even though everyone knows on some level that it's only performance. I offered to walk her home. She accepted. We moved through streets I had walked centuries before, when the city was smaller, dirtier, more honest about its brutalities. She didn't know this, of course. She thought I was some eccentric academic, some wealthy researcher with unusual interests and too much time. I told her stories as we walked, not lies, I'm grown tired of lies, but old truths. Truths so old they sound like fiction now. About princes and peasants, about wars fought for reasons no one remembers, about the way power moves through generations like blood through veins. She listened the way you listen to an old book, turning pages in her mind, pausing at passages that resonated. "They say you write as well," she said eventually. "I document," I replied. "Not stories, lives." "Whose lives?" "Everyone I meet." She smiled, faint, knowing. "Then you're writing me now?" "Perhaps. Perhaps I'm writing you right now." The rain intensified. We stopped beneath a street lamp, its light casting us both in amber, making shadows that stretched behind us like wings or sins. Her face glistened, not from the water, but from something else. Recognition. The particular glow that comes when understanding finally arrives. "You're not like others," she said quietly. "No," I agreed. "I'm older." The word hung between us. Older. Such a simple word. Such an insufficient container for 5 centuries of survival. She didn't ask what I meant, didn't demand clarification, didn't retreat into the comfortable assumption that I was speaking metaphorically. She just nodded, as if she'd known all along. Chapter 5. The Invitation. 2 days later, I found an envelope in my apartment, slipped under my door while I rested, or whatever you call the state that passes for rest in creatures like me. No return address, just my name in clean handwriting, Herr Dracula. Not Valente, not the cover identity I'd been using. My real name, my true name. The name I hadn't spoken aloud in this city in over a century. Inside, an invitation. A lecture at the old university. Topic: the myth of blood in modern literature. Location: Lecture Hall D. Speaker, Lena Varga. I went. The hall was half empty. Academics and students, the usual audience for doctoral presentations. She stood at the podium, nervous but luminous, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She spoke about blood as symbol, about power and sacrifice, violence and redemption, about the way vampire mythology had evolved from peasant superstition to Gothic romance to postmodern metaphor. She traced the lineage of the undead through literature, Polidori, Stoker, Rice, and beyond, showing how each generation reshaped the monster to fit its fears. And then she quoted me. Not as a person, she couldn't have known that, but as a legend, as a case study. It has been suggested, she said, her eyes finding mine in the audience, that Dracula drinks not to live, but to remember. He is the memory of guilt, the archive of sins that civilization would prefer to forget. He persists not because he wants to, but because we need him to. Because without him, we would have no container for our darkness. I felt the air thicken. The lights flickered. A coincidence, probably. Old wiring in an old building. But it felt like something else. Like the universe acknowledging that a boundary had been crossed. After the lecture, she came to me. The other attendees filtered out, discussing her arguments, debating her conclusions. But she walked directly to where I sat in the back row, as if she had known exactly where I would be. "I knew you'd come," she said. "You invited me." "No," she shook her head. "You came because you wanted to hear what I'd found. You've been looking for someone who understands." The directness of it stunned me. I am not easily stunned. "And do you understand?" I asked. She studied me for a long moment. Those gray eyes, seeing more than they should, seeing perhaps everything. "I understand that you're very old," she said quietly, "and very tired, and very alone." I had no response to this. It was too accurate to deny, too precise to deflect. "How long have you been researching me?" I asked. "My whole life," she said. "I just didn't know it until I saw you in the library." Chapter 6. The Decision. We walked together through the night. The wind was cold, the sky heavy with clouds that threatened more rain. Vienna at night is a city of ghosts. Not literal ghosts, but the accumulated specters of everyone who has ever lived and died here. Their traces visible in the architecture, audible in the echo of footsteps on stone. She told me about her dreams, about a man who had walked through her thoughts since she first read about Dracula as a child. "I thought I was imagining it," she said. "Some kind of psychological projection. But then I saw you in the library, and I knew." "Knew what?" "That you were real, that the stories were true, that everything I'd been studying wasn't just literature, it was history." We stopped at the Danube. The water was black, reflecting the city lights like scattered jewels. The air smelled of river and rain, and something older, something that had been here before the Habsburgs, before the Romans, before any human civilization claimed this particular bend of water. "Aren't you afraid?" I asked her. "No," she said. I'm only afraid of truth. And you're the truest thing I've ever encountered. I should have sent her away. Should have lied, denied, manufactured some explanation that would let her dismiss me as an eccentric, a madman, a method actor committed to a strange role. But I was tired, so tired of hiding, so tired of being unknown. I extended my hand. She took it. No compulsion, no threat, just agreement. Just two beings acknowledging what they were to each other. Observer and observed. Student and subject. Hunter and hunted. In a game where the roles kept shifting. I felt her pulse. Strong, living, human. I could have killed her. Could have drained her. Could have added her to the long list of casualties that my existence has produced. I didn't. Instead, I leaned close and whispered something in her ear, words that no one else knows, words that I have never spoken to another living being. She nodded. Then she walked away, slowly, without looking back, her footsteps echoing on the stone embankment until they faded into the sound of the river. I watched her go, and I felt something I hadn't felt in centuries. Hope. The possibility that understanding might be a form of redemption. That being truly seen might be, in some strange way, a kind of salvation. That was my third mistake, the fatal one.
Chapter 7. The Shadow on Paper.
The next morning, my door was ajar. I knew before I entered that something had changed. The air smelled different, like paper and ink and something else, something chemical, something that reminded me of archives and preservation. On my table lay a folder. Inside, her dissertation, complete, printed, bound in simple black. Title, The Eternal Observer, the vampiric as literary form of memory. Dedication, for the one who wrote me. I read it in a single night. Every page was blood in ink. Translation of my existence into academic language. She had seen me, all of me, not just the surface, the wealth, the power, the centuries of accumulated influence, but the underneath, the loneliness, the hunger that was never really about blood, the desperate, endless search for something that might make eternity bearable. She had recognized me not as monster, but as idea. And ideas are more immortal than bodies. Ideas cannot be killed, can only be forgotten. And she had made forgetting impossible. Her dissertation would be published, would be read, would enter the academic discourse and spawn other dissertations, other studies, other attempts to understand. My existence would become a subject of scholarly inquiry. My patterns would be analyzed. My methods would be documented. I was no longer invisible. I was a thesis. I wanted to find her, to ask how much more she knew, to understand whether she was ally or enemy, or something that didn't fit either category. But she was gone. Her apartment was empty. No furniture, no clothes, no sign that anyone had lived there. The neighbors didn't remember her. The university had no record of her enrollment. It was as if she had never existed, except for the dissertation in my hands, proof that she had. The building's superintendent shrugged when I asked. "A woman was here," he said, "dressed in black. She said she was the tenant's sister, took everything." I knew Lena had no sister. I returned to my apartment, stood at the window looking out at the Ringstrasse. Fog was moving through the city, white and heavy, breathing. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I smelled blood, old blood. Not hers, not mine. Something else. Something that had been watching while I was busy being watched. I took her dissertation, didn't burn it, placed it in my suitcase alongside the other testimonies of my existence. The letters, the photographs, the documents that proved I had been here and here and here, across centuries that most people couldn't imagine. She had written me into permanence, had given me a kind of immortality I hadn't asked for, the immortality of interpretation, of analysis, of being eternally studied by minds that would never quite understand, but would never stop trying. I didn't know whether to thank her or hunt her. Perhaps both. As I prepared to leave Vienna, I looked across the street at the building opposite. A figure stood in the window, a woman, dark hair, a notebook in her hand. She smiled. Not Lena. The face was different, the posture wrong. But the eyes were the same. Gray, deep, knowing. And on her table, visible even from this distance, lay a page covered in handwriting. My handwriting. Not a copy, not a forgery. My exact hand, my exact rhythm, my exact way of forming letters that I had developed over 5 centuries of documentation. At the top of the page, one sentence. Do you see me now? I stared at the figure. She stared back. The fog thickened between us, and when it cleared, seconds later, hours later, I couldn't tell, the window was empty, but the page remained, pressed against the glass. My words in someone else's possession. Someone who could write as me. Someone who had been watching me watch her. Someone who understood that the greatest threat to a predator isn't another predator. It's a mirror. End of entry 6.